Hello, world. We are live. Welcome to the March 2024 edition of the Laravel Worldwide Meetup. My name is Dan Sapelsa, and along with my co-host, Margaret, we're thrilled to bring you the latest installment of the Meetup, where we share some knowledge and insights from some of the many incredibly talented and smart people that we have across the Laravel community. And speaking of my co-host, Margaret, how you doing today?
I'm doing marvelous today, Dan. Thank you so much for asking. We've got an exciting meetup for you today.
Yeah, absolutely. Spring is in the air here as well in Canada, so I'm excited about that. But also excited about today's talk. We're excited to have TJ join us, a person that's well known around the Laravel community for a long time. He's going to share a very exciting topic that's been very much on everyone's mind the last year or so. But before we bring TJ in here, we've got a few slides we'd like to share here, and kick it over to you, Margaret.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. So yeah, just starting off before we get into it, we got some community announcements. So what's going on, what's new and happening in the Laravel community? The big news since last meetup, Laravel 11 has come out. So they got a new landing page, you got light and dark mode now, we got simplified app structure, new artisan commands, and much, much more. If you want to tune into what's going on there, you can definitely check out laravel-news.com for their podcast. And they also have a weekly email newsletter. So make sure to sign up for that to stay up to date with what's going on with Laravel. And they also have the podcast here. So you go to laravelpodcast.com, and that's where you can find the podcast. Next up, we also have Larajobs. So Larajobs here, if you're looking to hire, looking to post, looking for Laravel developer roles, you can definitely check them out at larajobs.com. They're a great resource in the community for all Laravel developers. Before we talk about Laracon US, we just wrapped up Laracon India. Looks like they had an amazing time from what I've been seeing on Twitter, on X, so that's been super awesome. But coming up is Laracon US, so hopefully they actually have a few tickets left. I think Taylor posted something yesterday about 100 tickets left, so ticket sales are going pretty well, but that's coming up in Dallas, Texas at the end of August. And
Very
you can check
much.
them out, Laracon.us.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, and speaking, I guess some other things that we got going on here. Oh, I got mixed up on this slide there. But yeah, big thanks to our host Vehicle. They have a great team of developers. So if you're looking for any Laravel help, you can definitely contact them and make sure to hit them up at vehicle.com. And we also have a JetBrains giveaway. So we're giving away one of two JetBrains product licenses. So thanks to our sponsor of JetBrains. Make sure to scan that QR code. And if you're watching the live stream on YouTube, you can rewind a little bit if you missed this QR code later on the meetup. But we're going to be holding the draw. I think April 6th is when we're going to do the draw. So watch out for an email from our community manager, Lee. She'll be contacting you if you won our contest.
Awesome.
And back to you.
Yes, and with that, we're gonna have our next, our first and only guest this month in here, TJ Miller. Like I said, a man that doesn't need much of an introduction around the Laravel community. He's been a longtime Laravel community member, past speaker at Laracon, PHP author and package author and maintainer, and most recently, as we were chatting, just the other day, prepping for this stream, has been become an AI enthusiast. Hey, TJ, how you doing?
Hey. How's it going? Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have you. So yeah, how's it been going lately? What have you been up to?
Good, man. I think the last year I've been deep diving AI and LLMs and Chat GPT, and I'm just so excited to be able to share everything I've learned with y'all.
Cool. Yeah, this is obviously a topic that's been very much in popular culture in the zeitgeist, if you will, and to be able to kind of dive into some of this stuff because we were talking just before the stream. Myself, definitely very much interested in the topic, longtime Laravel user, and I'm hoping today out of your talk I can get some tools to maybe get started in a relatively easy way. I don't have to worry about too much of what's going on under the hood, but then allow me to kind of dive under the hood as I get to know these concepts more, because there's so much to know here, right?
For sure. It's such a vast and deep hole of knowledge and different things you can go off and learn. It's a huge topic.
Absolutely. Cool. All right. Well, if you wanted to, you got some slides there I think we're going to start with. So we're trying to save up some questions to the end. If you have questions, I'm sure there'll be a lot today. Like we said, there's so much to cover here, and it's such a relatively new topic, even though it's been around a little bit now. If you have some questions, throw them in the chat. We'll try to save those for the end. But if you want to go ahead and share your screen there, TJ, bring up your slides, and then we will kick it over to you. All right, there we go. Cool.
Good deal.
Your screen, we're good to go. All right, Margaret and I are going to step out of the way here, and we'll head off. Someone's getting a phone call, and we will talk to you shortly. All right.
Good luck, DJ.
See you in a
Thank
little
you.
bit.
All right, cool. Hey, everybody. My name is TJ Miller, and today I'm going to be talking about adding a sparkle of AI to your Laravel applications. So who am I? I am from Southeast Michigan, born, raised, currently live here. I've been coding for a little over 20 years now. I got to start when I was pretty young. I got lucky. My dad worked for a tech company, so we had internet early, and just immediately started diving GeoCities and was bit then and still bit now. I've been coding with Laravel for a little over 10 years. I got an early jump start on it in my career, and just never looked back. It's the bee's knees for real. So I've been working with AI and LLMs for about a year and a half. My interest in machine learning extends beyond that, but it seemed so intimidating and just never got started. A little bit more about me. I live in a zoo and in the terminal. I have 5 dogs, 4 cats, a 10-year-old son, and I'm a NeoVim junkie. I live in the command line. It's my happy place. I've been married to my wonderful wife for 15 years. I work at Curology. I've been with them for about 4 years, and I'm in the middle of rebranding all of my extracurricular efforts under Echo Labs. So I used to race mountain bikes, and a weird fact, I flip butterfly knives for fun. I'm not even sure how I got into the hobby, but it is like the next level fidget spinner. It's fun. So how did I get here? About a year and a half ago, I saw the potential for what AI could do for me and honestly for my ADHD. And I was convinced that I could build things to make my life easier and as a side effect, make other people's lives easier. And I saw the pace of evolution and I knew that AI was here to stay and it was only going to get stronger. And I didn't want to miss the boat. I felt like I missed the boat on the Livewire hype up until recently, and I just didn't want to do that again. So I was all over it. But honestly, I didn't really have a choice. My ADHD latched onto it, and that hyper focus is just so strong. That pull to be there with AI and work with it is just stuck. So there was a level I just don't have a choice in this. So some goals for today. When I started looking at LLMs and AI, I was so overwhelmed. There's just so much to know, to do. There's data science, like a whole nother industry that like I just don't know enough about. And I was so intimidated. So today, my primary goal is to do everything in my power to lower that barrier to entry for y'all and make AI just feel a lot less intimidating. So as part of that, like I had to go out and learn Python. I know a lot of people learned that early on. It was just nothing that I had ever come across, didn't need to. I honestly started with PHP. So I had to go out and learn Python to work with all of this because pretty much everything in the data science world revolves around Python. So I then had to go out and learn some LLM, AI, and ML basics. And then I went and learned a bunch of frameworks to be able to use this stuff. So within the Python world, there's frameworks like LangChain, Haystack, GripTape, and Go. There's Lingoose. So there's a bunch of frameworks out there. And I went and learned as many of them as I could. Anytime a new one pops up on Reddit, I go give it a shot. I take a look at it. And I think I've been just chasing this like mythical API for how to interact with them and just haven't found it yet. But also, I think there's a piece of me that just really misses working with Laravel. In my day job, I get to work with it, but all this AI stuff, I've not been working with Laravel, and that just makes me sad. So I'm looking to just provide as much shortcuts as I can through the noise. And I just want to empower you to go get your hands dirty, whether you're shipping a feature, building a tool for yourself, or just want to level up your knowledge. Like I want to be here to empower you. So what we'll cover more specifically, we'll do a little LLM 101 to kind of set that baseline of knowledge. And then we'll do that with prompting, prompt engineering, text generation versus chat generation, and kind of some of the differences between the two and where those are heading. We'll touch on RAG. I'll explain that a little bit more later. And then we'll take a look at Sparkle, which is a package that I'm building to really help everybody get up and running as fast as possible. And then we'll talk about the next steps of like Sparkle and beyond. So LLM 101. Let me kind of paint a picture here, I think, to explain this in another way before I get really technical. Imagine a party where each of the guests represent a word in a sentence. Now, this isn't your typical party. It's one of those mass parties, like one of those Victorian ones. And the whole name of the game is to guess who's who. So in the LLM transformer architecture, the party's host is the masked language model. And the host's job is to identify the guest to predict a word, even when their identity is hidden and masked. The catch, the host can only use the clues from other guests, which would be the context in the sentence. So now the host just doesn't listen to each guest individually. That would be way too simple. Instead, the host listens to all the guests, the words, all at once, taking into account the relationships and the interactions, the context. This is what's called the attention mechanism. So the host uses this mechanism to weigh the importance of each guest's clues. Some guests are close friends, so they have a higher attention score, while others are just party crashers and their clues aren't helpful, so they get a lower attention score. The host uses these mechanisms, the host keeps doing this round after round, and these are layers. And it refines their guesses each time until they can actually accurately predict what's going to come out the other end. So to translate that back to LLMs are AI designed to generate human language. I've really come to think of it as just autocomplete on steroids, powered by the relationships between words and tokens. Tokens are partial words. It's the smallest amount. It's the smallest unit that an LLM uses to complete. So, like I said, the architecture for LLMs are based on the transformer architecture, and you think you get a pretty good idea of how that works based on that earlier explanation. They're trained on massive data sets, and when I mean massive, like trillions of tokens. So you'll see them be using content from Reddit, Wikipedia, from books. And here's an example, like a description from one of the data sets. I wanted to provide just an example of kind of what this data looks like. So this was for a data set available for training, an open source data set. The data set consists of conversations between a real human and GPT-4, which features long context windows, over 1,000 tokens per conversation, and multi-turn dialogue. So it's a big data set that's designed to guide an LLM to understand what a chat is. And now there's even models being trained on synthetic data generated by other LLMs. So you'll see a lot of times fine-tuning data sets, and other data sets for like local and open source models, leveraging data that's available and generated by GPT-4, which is much more powerful. So the building blocks of LLMs, we talked about transformers a little bit, but a transformer consists of an encoder and a decoder. The encoder processes like the input, and the decoder generates the output. And those are done in multiple layers of encoders and decoders. So we mentioned layers in the last slide. This is where that kind of gets applied. So the attention mechanism is another huge piece. That's what allows the transformers to focus on different parts of the input sequence in processing each word or token. So you have the training. So typically there's the pre-training stage, which is on those very large data sets. And then a lot of them go through an additional fine-tuning layer. And fine-tuning is another thing that you can reach for your own models to just really, shape them in a very specific way. So they can be, LLMs can be fine-tuned for a specific task or specific data set to accomplish whatever their task is. So you can fine-tune it to become better at chat. You can fine-tune it to become better at a very specific coding language, like a PHP specialist. And then when we talk about the landscape of different providers and models, there are so many, especially once you start diving into the open source world. But these are some of, I think, the more common ones that you'll come across. Anthropic, who's responsible for the Claude models, Claude 1 through 3. Right now, they just somewhat recently released 3 new models, Opus, Sonnet, and Haiku. have different purposes between the three of them, but they're very powerful. And I think Opus is actually one of the first models to be able to legitimately compete with GPT-4. So that was something that was very cool to see happen. Other names and faces on here, Maestral AI, they're big in the open source world, and they've been really innovating with like mixing different models together. Then there's Olama, which is going to be like helping you serve up local models on your own laptop or your own servers at home or in the cloud. We have OpenAI, that shouldn't be a stranger to anybody. Gemini, which is Google's new AI, and Hugging Face and Replicate. These are two you might not have heard of. You can think of Hugging Face as kind of the GitHub for AI. You can host and run models on there, but you can also host like UIs. It's fascinating. They have data sets available. It's such a cool product. And then Replicate is also a bit unique, whereas they serve as kind of a portal to accessing many different models and providers. So that's like the perfect place to go play around with a feature or something that you're building to try to find the best model fit to what you're doing. And I just wanted to share my most used models out of the entire landscape. These 6 are the ones that I use pretty much on a daily basis. I choose which model I want based on the task that I have at hand. So we'll see the GPT-4 and Opus right up at the top. Those are going to be the most powerful models, followed by Turbo and Sonnet, which are very comparable. And then you'll see Open Hermes Maestral, and that looks a lot different. And that's because that's an open source, like local model. It's going to be smaller. It's less powerful than all of them, but I can power it and run it and get auto completion on, you know, my laptop, which isn't anything special. It's an older M1 with 16 gigs of RAM. It's amazing that I'm able to run that on there and get the performance that I am. So that's just why that one looks a little bit different. So what can we use these LLMs for? Here's some powerful use cases. You know, we have content generation, so you can generate articles, product descriptions, marketing copy. You can summarize long pieces of text. And this is something that I use. I use all of these quite a bit. So in my use case is content generation. A lot of times I will have a bulleted list of notes or just a real stream of consciousness, a note, and I need to generate an actual like note that other people can read, or maybe something that I can look back on and then make sense for me later. So I'll use that for content generation, but I'll also use it for summarization, you know, sentiment analysis, language modeling. So as language models improve, they can actually be used to assist other natural language processes. So like speech to text and text synthesis. And then the big one that I think we're all really chasing, the golden goose. I mean, you're either chasing it or you're scared of it because it's going to come take your job. Generating code. So either generating code for programming tasks like auto-completion. So you'll see that with Cody and Copilot, or generating entire applications. It's not that good to do whole applications. It's just not there yet. There's a long way to go, but small applications absolutely can do. I've had several agents build whole Go applications for the CLI for me with really not much trouble. It's pretty cool. So on the configuration front, you know, there are so many different options to configure these that it is nauseating and so confusing. So really, outside of max tokens, I feel that these are the 2 most important configuration settings. You probably won't play with any of the other settings much at all, but these make the biggest difference. You know, so temperature and top P control how the language model selects the next word when generating text. Higher temperatures make the output more random and creative, while lower temperatures make it a little bit more predictable and factual. So for writing a story, you're probably going to want to go more creative, but for writing code, you might want to go a little bit more predictable and factual because, you know, we are dealing with a pretty black and white 1s and 0 world. So after the model narrows down the candidate for the next words based on temperature and based on temperature, you know, top P then selects the top P % most likely candidates for the next word or the next token. So a lower top P means it's more selective in choosing the next word, and a higher top P lets it be, a little bit looser. So as far as defaults go, if you don't pass in anything, pretty much all of the frameworks and the defaults at the different providers and models, you'll see a default of 1 for temperature. The range for some of the newer models is 0 to 2. Some of the older models or less powerful models, depending on the platform you're using, will only have a range of 0 to 1. Top P, again, that defaults to 1 with a range of 0 to 1. So that was just a bunch of random numbers. What should you use? Most commonly, and what you'll see around ChatGPT, is like a 0.5 to 0.8 temperature with a top P of 0.9 to 1. Where I think the sweet spot really is a temperature of 1.2 to 1.6 and a top P of 0.1 to 0.2. So I think that's the sweet spot between creativity and coherence. It's taken a while to kind of find it, but that seems to be the best spot to start off with and then kind of move on from there. But anything above 1.6, it's just going to get increasingly nonsensical. So let's talk about prompt engineering. I think this is ultimately the most important piece of how all of this works. When you're a kid, at least when I was a kid, my parents really drove it into my head, like watching TV, garbage in, garbage out. And that is so true inside of prompt engineering. A bad prompt will ruin the output every time, and a good prompt makes everything. So LLMs need guidance to create a desired response, and that's where prompt engineering comes into play. It extends beyond just simply asking the right questions to get the best answers, but it's integral to all of your interactions. So when I want to start talking about prompt engineering, like the first thing that comes to mind is Sam Walker. I discovered Sam 6 or 8 months into this adventure of learning AI, and I was just not able to get the results I wanted. And I stumbled across this post where there was somebody on Reddit asking for help on like an engineering or code, some technical task that involved multiple steps and kind of having a bigger picture of some architecture. And Sam had posted a character prompt for Tony Stark. And not only had I never seen a prompt written this way, I've never seen a prompt that was so effective. It was insane. It had all of the personality of Tony Stark, but not only that, it was accomplishing these tasks that I couldn't see any other prompt doing. I could never get it to guide the responses in this way before. And so it blew my mind. And I think this quote from Sam is just so poignant. And I think if any of you have played around with ChatGPT, you'll probably find this to be true. As most people who work with ChatGPT discover very quickly, the default persona you're talking to when you chat with ChatGPT is like you're talking to a very well-meaning but inexperienced 19-year-old intern. When I read that quote, it just hit home. Like, I think that's just very accurate in the way I think about it. So Sam is with Collaborative Dynamics. He has a Patreon. He's very active on Reddit. He has a very active Discord. I highly recommend going and reading his content and getting an understanding of how prompt engineering works. He's got a very unique way of thinking about it, and I think it's the right way. And he's being very innovative. And so I think that's someone to pay very close attention to. He has another thought that I very much align with, and he thinks that coders and engineers like us working inside of Laravel are bad at prompt engineering just inherently, because traditional coding involves giving explicit instructions to the computer, which then executes those instructions literally and sequentially. And that process is grounded in logic, right? It's got rules and the execution's defined, like those actions are already predefined. So with prompt engineering, though, especially with large language models, It's just a fundamentally different principle. It's not about instructing the AI to perform specific operations step by step, but rather it's about guiding the AI's response generation through context and hints and nudges. And the AI's response is generated based on patterns and relationships and the associations that it's learned through its vast data sets, not through logic-based execution of instructions. So there's a big difference when you're using ChatGPT and the GPT-4 via the API. They're both backed by similar models, but the biggest difference with ChatGPT is they've put a significant amount of prompt engineering in front of that interface that you're working with. So whenever you send a single message to ChatGPT, there's actually paragraphs of text that are going before your message to kind of build up that world to help guide the LLM in its response. So like I said, Sam's got a Patreon. He's got tons of articles. He's got prompts that you can buy. He's got prompts for sale. I think they're worth every penny. Sam has changed the way that I think about prompting, and I'm very thankful for it. So looking at prompt engineering, there's a handful of, more than a handful of techniques that are used. I don't want to go through all of them. I think the first three are the ones you'll experience, I think, the most. And that's 0, 1, and few shot prompting. And the 0, 1, or few is referring to the amount of examples of like example output that you're expecting. So prompt engineering building blocks. There's a few pieces that kind of build up all of prompt engineering. Like in the past, if someone wanted to work with an ML model, you had to have extensive knowledge of data sets and the statistics, the modeling techniques, but prompt engineering makes it possible for anyone to just use plain language to interact with the LLM. So these core pieces are context, which is supplied relevant background information that you want the LLM to have available as it generates this text. We want to provide inside of a prompt, we want to provide clear instructions, and you want them to be simple. Like I said, LLMs behave like a well-meaning 19-year-old intern. It's not going to follow multiple steps really well. So simple instructions is the best way to go. And then you want to provide some examples of your desired output to help guide it and nudge it in the right direction. And then add on, like if you're doing text generation, guidelines for tone and style, length, formatting. Do you want this in JSON? Do you want it in Markdown, plain text? So these are all different pieces of a prompt that you're going to want to think about as you're, building out this world for your LLM to work inside of. So what are our goals? What are our outcomes from prompt engineering, right? Like I said earlier, garbage in, garbage out. We want to generate more accurate and relevant responses. So that's where we get some enhanced productivity. Training models is so resource intensive, and then fine tuning them can be expensive as well. So this good prompt can reduce the need for additional retraining or more extensive pre-training. A well-crafted prompt can make an AI model more versatile. And so a good prompt can also teach the LLM to reason and decipher different types of patterns in different ways when it's answering its questions. And it's just a valuable teaching tool to provide that vital instruction for boundaries and reason. We want these AIs to be safe when we're interacting with them. If you're asking an AI to, how can I more efficiently have a ton of paper clips, at some point an AI could very well switch over and say, all right, yeah, let's eliminate humans because they're using paper clips and I need all the paper clips. Well, we don't want that. So that's something that we can build into the prompt, the initial prompt and the prompt engineering is some safety checks, some guidelines, some guidance to, not end humans for paper clips. So here's kind of the progression of a prompt, kind of going from something super basic to something very crazy. So something at a pretty basic level, you are a helpful assistant. That's your prompt. That's what you're kind of setting as the baseline for your model to then interact with. Something a little bit of a step above that would be, hey, you're a helpful assistant with over 30 years of experience with Laravel. Well, we all know Laravel hasn't been around for 30 years, but these models tend to react really well to flattery. So you're setting the stage and the relationship for this to be, yo, you're an experienced programmer, very specifically with Laravel. So it's going to approach the problems in that, like with that mindset. And we then give it a task to say, your task is to be a pair programmer. And I want your responses to be concise. I don't want these like long droning things. I want you to tell me what I need to do to get moving. And then I also want you to assume I have at least an intermediate understanding of like Laravel and PHP, because I don't want you to have like every time I ask you a question, I don't want you to have to be like, composer require Laravel, then you got to start the project. I don't need any of that, or I don't need the explainer behind all of that. Just assume I kind of know what I'm doing with this, and let's leave the explanations light and give me the information I'm actually after. But if we want to take this to another level, this is a prompt that I built yesterday, kind of just for this, but this is a short example. The next slide will be like the full thing, but this is really taking it to another level. And this prompt is applying everything that I have learned from Sam, who I mentioned earlier, into prompting. And this is what that prompt looks like. It's wild. This is what I saw when I saw that Tony Stark prompt. Was just, I didn't understand it, and it was crazy and it was effective. But if you look at it, what it's doing is building up and showing you the model a bunch of different relationships. Here's how all these things relate. And here's like a workflow and how it's all related to the way to like approach this problem. But then we're also setting the stage for how we want it to respond and things that we want it to do. So this prompt, Lyra, was designed specifically to be a character prompt for generating images. If you saw me on Twitter yesterday, I posted a handful of images for Laravel News, PHP Ugly, Fly System, the North Meets South podcast. But what I wanted to showcase was like the quality of a prompt and the kind of output you get from a high quality prompt like this. All of those images that I posted yesterday, and I'll show you in the next slide, were all generated off of this base prompt and me sending a single sentence to it saying, I would like to see, for example, let's take a look at these slides. So the first Laravel News one, I said, hey, can you give me a poster, create me a description for a poster for Laravel News. I want that text to be prominently displayed. I'd like it in a graffiti style, lots of loud colors. That's all I sent to it. And its response back to me was several paragraphs describing exactly what this image is to look like. So it was talking about how the V should be shaped, how the S is supposed to look, which colors to use, the spray cans. Its whole purpose is to generate very detailed descriptions for images. And I think I've seen a lot of people struggle with generating images before. And this just kind of showcases like that kind of high quality output that you can get when you're leveraging high quality input with a very strong prompt. So let's now talk about text generation. This is kind of that like very basic concept for how these LLMs work. It's essentially autocomplete on steroids. So here I'm showing 2 sentence starters that I came up with. It's an email I'm putting together. I hope you're doing well. It's been a while since we last caught up, and I wanted to reach out because, and that's just where I left it, because space, that's it, smash generate. So with a medium temperature, we got 2 very different responses out of completing that. And it works great. This is what it looks like as far as a request goes, but using chat via text generation, because chat models didn't exist when I got started. It was all text generation. So if you wanted to have a chat bot, this is what that request looked like. We tell it that this is a following conversation between a helpful assistant and a user. Then we straight up line by line say, hey, this is the assistant's first message. This is the user's message. And then we leave a trailing off at the end of a space for the assistant to fill in and then keep going. So now it has the context of we're in the middle of a chat. This is a conversation. Oh, look, here's the conversation. Here's the pattern of assistant user. Oh, it's the assistant's turn. Well, let me just autocomplete this with what is most probable to be the response from the assistant. So looking at chat, which was kind of like the next iteration, because most people were using these to build chatbots. So there were a lot more conveniences if you wanted to focus specifically on chat that you could build into these integrations. So I believe OpenAI was really the first one here to come out with a chat interface and a chat model to use. And most places have been following suit. So this is what that same conversation looks like in the chat world. So coming from the text generation autocomplete, we're still telling, hey, you're a helpful assistant. And then now we're adding that user message of, well, how do we create a controller in Laravel? But you can see how this is so much easier to manage a conversation. We're just pushing things to an array versus then having to build up this huge wall of text. And the back end of this LLM knows how to stitch these back together in a way that gives it basically drives it back to text generation. But for us, it's so much easier to use. And I want to give a little preview of some stuff to come a little later with the Sparkle framework that I'm building. But this is how you can have a conversation with an assistant with the package that I'm building. So you can see we start a new conversation. We add those messages from the system and from the user, pass the like an LLM to the assistant, and then we can have that continue that conversation. So I'd like to talk about RAG because I think this is like one of the most common use cases I think I see is we want to add additional information to a model without having to retrain or fine tune it. So RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. So we're going to augment our prompt with additional information to aid our generation. And we're going to be retrieving that from an additional location or an additional source. So again, LLMs can reason about a wide range of topics, but their knowledge is super limited to the data they're trained on and that cutoff time. If you want to build AI applications that can reason about either private data or data introduced after the model's cutoff, really the only way to accomplish that is either through training or you augment the knowledge of the model with the specific information that it needs. There's two really important components that make up RAG. It's sort of three, but really two. There's indexing, which is the pipeline for how we ingest the data that we're going to use for the augmentation. And then there's the retrieval and the generation process. So indexing normally happens offline, is a separate process or ad hoc. It stores the indexes and data that it ingests. And then you have the retrieval and generation side. And this is where it actually takes the user's query, goes off and retrieves that relevant data that we got from indexing, and then passes that to the model as part of the prompting so that it can then use that information to guide its response. So some details about indexing. So how we do an index, first we need to load our data. Then we split it up. We break the documents into smaller chunks. And there's two reasons for doing this. One, there's a limited window and a limited amount of text that you can send in a message to an LLM. So we want to keep these chunks small so that we can maximize how much information we have. But also, all of those words or tokens, those you're charged by the token. And so if you're sending all these additional tokens because you're sending huge chunks of additional information, that's going to cost you a pretty penny. And that's something that you'll definitely want to avoid. And then we also need storage. And this is where I think there's that kind of weird third piece is like indexing, retrieval and generation, and there's like storage. We need somewhere to store the split information from our index. That way we can search it over later and then be able to pull that information out with the retrievers. So this is done typically using a vector style database and an embedding model. So from the LangChain docs, which is a framework for Python for interacting with LLMs, I found this awesome infographic where I think really kind of shows that process of like the initial parts of RAG, where we're loading in all sorts of different types of documents and data, splitting them up, creating them into indexes inside of a three-dimensional space, and then storing them in that database. So vector storage. Let's talk a little bit more about that because it seems like a neat concept. Something different for sure when we're all used to relational storage databases, NoSQL, or it's just a different type of storage engine that I had never come across, at least. So words and sentences of text are typically represented as vectors, which are referred to as embeddings. And these embeddings capture the semantic meaning and the relationship between different pieces of text. So going back to where we started and talking about this, the LLMs are these like predictive relationship engines. And so we're further playing into that by using these semantic embeddings. So a vector database is specifically designed to store stuff, like to store these vectors efficiently and to help on the retrieval process. So instead of solely relying on that training information, we have access to RAG. And then when the LLM receives a message, RAG goes out to the vector store, retrieves that relevant information, and then you have that available to use in your prompt however you'd like. To the retrieval and generation side, given the user's input, let's go retrieve that relevant information using a retriever. And that retriever can be incredibly advanced to re-rank the options that come back to something simple of just give me what's semantically closest. And then we pass that to the model. The model performs its generation using that additional retrieved data. And again, from the LangChain docs, we have another infographic here that I think perfectly illustrates how we have the question, then we go into the retrieving of those chunks, assemble everything back into the prompt, send it to the LLM, then we get our response. And so this is what a prompt looks like with that additional context. So our base prompt, I wanted to set up like a persona of Merlin the Wizard. I have a dog named Merlin. I just thought it would be fun. I use Merlin a lot. But anyhow, we tell it that it needs to use the following context to answer the user's questions. LLMs actually really like XML. So we're going to continue to use that here. And we're going to add the user's question. And then we're going to give it a semantic chunk of context from the Laravel docs. So I built this engine up, and then I grabbed a piece that actually came back from the vector store. So I sliced everything up, and this is an actual relevant chunk that came back talking about routing from the routing.md document inside the Laravel docs. So it's pretty cool that we can see how we add that information in there, and it's directly the information that the model needs to know. And so if there were route changes in Laravel 11, then this would know about those changes that GPT-4 definitely wouldn't. I mean, I think if you ask GPT-4 about Laravel 10, it still says it's not available. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't, but that's why RAG is so important. So I'd like to talk about Sparkle and what Sparkle is. It's a Laravel package I'm building. It's basically taking all of the information, all of the learnings that I've got by working with all of those Python frameworks and bringing it home to Laravel and really applying that Laravel flavor to everything, where it is super, super powerful defaults to get you up and running, but hyper customizability for when you do need to drop in and kind of make it your own. Along with that, I'm going to be providing, the package is basically the building blocks to allow you to build AI workflows, features, applications. And like I said, powerful defaults, completely customizable. Features that come along with this: access to models, many different models, many different providers. I'm definitely supporting all the ones that I had in the slide earlier, and there will be tons more that I'll be building in. I'm leveraging Blade to give us really powerful prompting templates. I'm also building output parsing, because something I'll show you a little bit later, we need to be able to have JSON out as the response from an LLM, and they're not always great about doing that. So we need some way to intercept that and maybe correct that JSON if it's a problem. I'll be building in the retrieving, the document loading, the text splitting, the embedding. I'm building all of that entire RAG workflow into the framework. But on top of that, we're going to build some really big abstractions. So agents can have tools, and agents can have toolkits. I'm trying to build some really advanced tracing so that we can have strong observability of over all the decisions that the AI is making. I'm going to build a bunch of batteries included off-the-shelf agents and components that you can compose together to build an application really fast and be able to just start playing with as many features as you want. So now that we've talked about Sparkle a little bit, I'd like to show you how we're going to be able to do RAG with Sparkle. So we start off, right? I have a Laravel app. I go into the storage directory, I clone the Laravel docs, and we can see here that we have all of the markdown files for everything already available. I love this. This makes it so easy. If everyone put their docs on GitHub, I would be the happiest camper for just this purpose. Then we're going to create the LLM that we're going to use. In this case, we use GPT-4. We'll use those sweet spot settings that I talked about earlier for temperature and top P. And then I make it really easy to create the RAG engine by adding the embedder that we talked about earlier. We'll use the Ada02 from OpenAI. And then all we have to do is use our directory loader to load those documents and attach them to our RAG process. And then this is how we build up that conversation that utilizes that RAG. So we create a new conversation, we add some messages. Again, we leverage Merlin, we ask it how to handle the route, and then we build that agent up, passing it the LLM to use, the conversation that it's having, and the RAG engine. And now we have an agent that has all of the relevant information with brand new Laravel 11 documents. It's awesome. It should make life super simple. But I think maybe one of the most powerful features that I'm building as part of this, and the one that I'm most excited to see what y'all build with, is function calling. So giving the AI, or like an AI agent, the ability to call a closure or a callable inside your own code base, and that closure or callable returning a string and having that string passed back as context to the prompt, I think is going to be so powerful. A growing number of chat models like OpenAI and Gemini have function calling API built into the actual service itself. The models are designed to return a JSON object, and that JSON object is, here's the function I need to call, and here's all the arguments that I need to pass to that function. And it will return like, hey, this is what we need to do. You pass that to your closure or callable, that returns the response, and then that gets added to the prompt as the context automatically. And so you can also use function calling with models and providers that don't have native support for it, but it's definitely challenging, and the results are a bit mixed, but very feasible through solid prompt engineering. So let's take a look at what this looks like. I've got a little GIF up here of what it looks like having a basic chat loop with an agent that has a function available. You can see we're having a normal conversation, but then we ask it something real time, like, what was the score of the Tigers game today? And on the right, you can see in the tracing that the agent decided to call a function and what the function's response was. This is so powerful. And this is how we build up this function calling. So that last example I showed, we were asking about the score of a Tigers game. So we build up that model again. This time I wanted to use something less expensive. I used GPT 3.5 Turbo. I went ahead with the sweet spot temperature again, but I knew that this was going to be a small response. So I limited the max tokens down just to kind of make more sense. The other unique thing you see here with the conversation that we created is we're adding in the current date time to the system prompt. And the reason why we're doing that is because we're asking the LLM about real-time events. It needs to know what date and time it is in order to go off and maybe use a tool that searches Google. So we want to make sure that that's ever present in that prompt, because otherwise it would have no access to it. And then we ask it a question. What time is the Tigers game today? Do I need to bring a coat or bring sunglasses? So let's build these tools. I'm so sorry this stuff's blurry. I was doing my best. But here's how we define a tool. We defined a tool called search, and we tell the LLM when it's useful to use this tool. So if you need to search for current events, then we define what arguments need to be passed to this closure. We tell it, hey, you need to pass a query, and that's a string, and this is what the description is. And you can see this closure defined here will actually accept that query string in as an argument, and your response is a string that's passed back to that context. So here you could do something like make an API request to the Serper API and have access to Google search results pretty easily. But then we had a second part of that question. We also need a tool to be able to check the weather. It could use search, or I could build a tool that's very specific to just getting weather information. So again, we define the weather. We don't need any arguments for this one. We're going to just assume that, well, maybe somewhere in the function, get the user's ID or something, get the localization off the user record, and then be able to query a weather API, return what the forecast is going to be as a string to be used in the context. We create our agent. Instead of passing RAG this time, we pass an iterable of the tools that are available to it. I know this is pretty small text, but I wanted to encapsulate what the entire thing looks like for just spinning up these two tools inside of this conversation. This is an older API for the package that is changed a bit since then, but you get the gist of it, where we have the messages, we build up those tools, and you can see on the tracing and observability on the right that it's choosing to use the search tool, completed it, and it was said, oh, you know what? There's a second part of this question. Let me use this other tool and get the weather information. Then it's able to generate the final response where it's saying, hey, you should wear the Tigers game scheduled for 3 p.m. And as for the weather, you should be fine because it's a high of 70 and it's partly cloudy. So I try to make it really easy to do some of these more advanced workflows. And I am so excited to see what y'all do with functions, because you could get super crazy with functions. And inside of that closure, you can accept an SQL query. And then you could take that SQL query that the LLM built for you, let it query your database, return that response as a string, and essentially you could have an agent that can query your application's database to get its own context to perform RAG, and then you could chat your application or have it help develop a report for you. I think it has so much potential. And I'm just really excited to see what everyone builds with it. So next steps for Sparkle. I've talked about this in sort of an aspirational way. This is all, it's coming out of tools that I've built and just like spaghetti from features that I've needed to build for myself in my own workflows. I got about 3/4 of the way through and just didn't like how the API was behaving as I was putting together attributes for this talk. So I've kind of dove into another rewrite and it's got way better support for everything. So what's next? I'm targeting a beta release about 3 weeks from now. Could be sooner, probably not any later. But that'll be a beta release with all support for RAG. It'll have support for functions, and it'll have a smattering of tools for you to be able to use with those agents. Then I'm going to focus on docs and examples. I want to build so many examples, and I want to build them with all the batteries so y'all can just grab them and run with them. And then beyond that, I just want to continue to focus on building out extra tools and integrations. So for example, one of the integrations that I really want to make, I want to make a tool and an agent available to query your Notion database. So you could chat your knowledge store for your company. And those are all things that I want to build and provide for you. So to like wrap things up, there's going to be two pieces to Sparkle. We have Sparkle on the left here. We have Shine on the right. Sparkle is going to be our building blocks package. That's mostly what I've talked about today. That's the essential functionality that you'll need to get building. And then Shine is going to be that additional package with all the batteries included stuff. tons of tools, tons of agents to just jumpstart your journey into AI. So I really appreciate y'all listening to me today, and I'm just excited to talk to you. I'm excited to finish building this out. I want to see what y'all build, and I hope y'all learned something new today.
All right. Whew, thank you very much, TJ. That was, as you said, there's so much to know, and I could tell that, trying to summarize that stuff, even in a 40-minute or so talk, is incredibly difficult, I'm sure. And there's probably any one of those topics you could have dove into and probably done a whole talk on. So,
Yeah,
thank you for doing such a great job of kind of pulling this stuff together, and especially for people like myself that haven't taken a deep dive myself, giving me a crash course or sort of a high level overview of some of these concepts.
Yeah, I tried to touch on like the things that I think are really essential to starting with, and you can kind of build from there. But yeah, just kind of jumpstart you out of the gate.
Yeah, that's awesome. Actually, one of the first little notes I made here was the thing you mentioned at the beginning, which I just wanted to ask about is why is there so much Python in data science? Like it's, you think with big, data, you'd maybe have like, the fastest possible language, which I don't think Python is. So it's like, why is there so much Python in data science?
I think that's just where the tools are.
Yeah.
Like I said, I went out and learned enough Python to be productive in what I'm doing. So I don't know if I can even give that a wholehearted answer, because it was thin learning. Like I wanted to focus my learning on the AI stuff. So the Python was definitely second fiddle.
Yeah. Cool.
Very cool. Just want to, make a little announcement for anyone that's listening. If you have any questions for TJ, make sure to drop them in the chat, and then we'll look through them. But we do have some that we already have lined up as well. I know, I guess one of the big questions that I had after listening to your talk, and great job, TJ, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
I just want to know, what have you found useful in avoiding getting like fake or untrue information from ChatGPT?
So you can't completely avoid it, but high quality prompt engineering will definitely cut back significantly on hallucinations and like false and misleading information. There's a few strings you can kind of add into a prompt to help guide it that way, but really something like that prompt that I showed earlier that was just gnarly with all of those relationships and emojis in there. Something like that builds up all of those relationships in a way that prevents hallucinations to a certain extent. But it is ultimately like unavoidable. You have to be a discerning individual when you're trusting these results.
Yeah. The prompt engineering and creating good prompts, it feels to me like there's a bit of trial and error to it. Have you found that? Yeah, just
100%. And there's services out there that will let you put in one prompt and run it against many models and be able to kind of compare that output across that landscape, or have different versions of the prompt out there and be able to like test those and get feedback on it. So there's all sorts of stuff based on like evaluations of prompts and prompt engineering, but it's definitely some trial and error. And it's, I think, foundationally one of the most important building blocks. And it's, I think, challenging for us as engineers to think about the world in a little bit different way than such black and white.
Definitely. I mean, thinking in different ways. It was really cool hearing your analogy. I never thought of LLMs in that way before, but as you broke it down, I don't know what it was, but it just made it a lot clearer. So that was awesome how you came up with that.
Thank you. Yeah, that was honestly, that was a gift from one of my agents. I basically have life pair programming agents that I've put together. I have a whole fleet of different people I use for different purposes. And that was, I was struggling figuring out how to explain it. And one of the character prompts I got from Sam really broke it down in that way. And I was able to kind of massage it into the presentation. So yeah, even that kind of stuff, perfect use case for an LLM. Explain this to me more clearly, or give me an analogy that I'll understand. It's a perfect partner for learning.
I think it's what we're all going to have to need.
That's how I learned Python in order to do what I needed to do. Like, I didn't go take a course somewhere. I just had an LLM start teaching me Python. Like, I need to do this. Here's how I know to do it in PHP. How would I do this in Python? and it would explain to you, it would give you the whole explanation of like how to translate between the two. But like, that's just how I learned. Like the Python that I needed to learn was just pairing with an AI.
Cool. Got a few questions in the chat here. I'll throw this one up here. Is it possible to use a free LLM, Hugging Face, instead of ChatGPT?
100%. And when I was talking about Ollama as well earlier, those are models and things that you can run on your local laptop for free, or you can self-host, and those are all available to also run on Hugging Face. So there's lots of opportunities for free use if you just do a little digging. And go sign up for providers. A lot of times, like I think right now, I'm not even paying for Claude Opus because I had a pre-existing account and I got some free credits from being there, and they want you to try their new models. So just being there and around there, they want you to use them. There's lots of opportunities for free stuff, but definitely check out the local models in Ollama and being able to like do the inference directly on Hugging Face.
Another question. You got one, Dan?
This one right here from the chat.
Yeah, go for it.
How do you decide which model, example, ChatGPT-4 versus GPT-4 Turbo, etc., to use for prompts? Number of tokens.
Yeah, number of tokens. Honestly, most of the time I leave that pretty wide open unless I know I want a limited response. Most of the time, I just use as many tokens as it takes to give me my answer. But if I'm putting something out in production, I definitely want to reduce the amount of output, because at the end of the day, I'm paying for every token that goes in and every token that's generated. So kind of think about the kind of response and the size of the response that you want back, and that can kind of help guide the number of max tokens. But as far as choosing the model, it's pretty nuanced, and I think it just depends on what my end goal is. I think with LLMs, it's really important to have an end goal when you start. It's really easy to get lost. So I kind of choose my model based on my end goal. GPT-4 Turbo is like the latest and greatest that OpenAI has. And so if I'm trying to do something like super complex or something that I think is going to be kind of pushing the boundaries for what LLMs can do, I'm automatically going to go for the super high powered stuff. So GPT-4 Turbo or Claude Opus, that's like going to be right off the rip. But if it's something a little bit more casual, or I just want to be a little bit more budget conscious, because GPT-4 is more expensive. So the pricing also plays into this a little bit of just like, I've already ran up my GPT-4 bill this month. So now I'm stuck on 3.5 until my bill rolls over. It's decisions like that too. But really just kind of have an end goal in mind. Think about how much power you need that LLM to have and choose accordingly. But try it. Like I said, there's multiple services out there where you can set a base prompt and run it against multiple models in parallel. So if I'm really trying to do something and I'm not sure, I'll kind of go that route and just see what I'm getting, and then I'll choose the least powerful one that gives me the best results, because then I'm not, overpaying for something that a lesser model could do totally fine.
Is there another option where maybe it kind of connects to the previous question, your answer? But can I self-host at all? Is that an option to self-host a model? Is that if I do something like that, is that sort of like I could pay for a SaaS app every month, or I could self-host a version of the SaaS app? Am I no longer subject to like token limits and stuff if I'm self-hosting?
No, that's a great question. You will never be able to self-host GPT-4.
No, I wouldn't imagine something.
Yeah,
big like
that's not going to be a thing that ever happens. But much smaller models. So one of the models I mentioned in that one of the models I mentioned out of the ones that I use is that Open Hermes Mistral 2.5. So that's what's called, it's a model that's trained on 7 billion parameters. So instead of trillions, like you see with GPT-4, it's trained on a smaller base set of data. And then it's fine-tuned for chat purposes. So it's really compact. And then they further compact it with something that's called quantization. Way too technical for me. But basically these models are small enough that I can run on 16 gigs of RAM and on my laptop. So it's super easy to self-host and interact with. And, you know, if you have like a powerful gaming PC, you could totally use, like NVIDIA has a whole suite of tools to be able to host your own models on like their video cards.
Cool. And that, I think, kind of connects to this question I put up here from Nuno. Are those free LLMs something you can set up on your own production server? And I think you kind of touched on that, but more specifically, how resource intensive are they? Also, do they provide the same answer quality as something like OpenAI?
Yeah, let's break this down. Production, I would not try to run this in production. There are so many managed hosting providers that are specifically designed for hosting LLMs. Because like you could run Olama on your server, but it's very CPU heavy. And I don't know if you really want to be running a giant compute instance. It's not practical for a production environment. But there are lots of hosting providers that can host those models for you. They are pretty resource intensive. So I have, let's see, what is this? So I have a underpowered computer. It's a 2020 13-inch MacBook Pro, M1, 16 gigs of RAM. If I run the largest version of that 7 billion parameter model, it's pretty slow. And I can't run a whole lot else. So 7 billion you can do on 16 gigs of RAM. I think you need to go to like 32 to be able to run like the next step up from 7 billion. But they're pretty resource intensive. Because remember, what you're doing with those is instead of running them on a video card, you're now running them on a CPU. So it's a totally different world. And what was the last part of that question? Quality. Quality nowhere near the same at all, for sure. There's really only been one other model that I think has legitimately been able to compete with GPT-4, and that's the brand new Claude Opus. So that's another one of those where you'll never be able to host it. It's just so big and resource intensive. So the local stuff, it can get you really far. But it's not going to be the same as going with, you know, a bigger model trained on trillions of tokens.
That kind of connected to another thought I had, and this kind of maybe gets away from the focus of your talk, but just or can you create your own model? You know, if I'm thinking specifically like for it'd be a corporation might have, you know, internal tooling and proprietary data, trade secrets, things like that they want to, you know, use this with, but don't want to expose it to the outside world, want to keep that data within sort of the walls of the organization. What's the options there? What's that look like?
Yeah, so your real two primary options are going to be using RAG. So we can use like that RAG system to be able to inject that proprietary information directly into the prompt. But if you did want to do training, that's where you'd be reaching for fine-tune training. You wouldn't probably be actually making your own pre-trained base model. That's really resource intensive and expensive. So a lot of times you'll find a good base model and then fine-tune it. And that process, you could absolutely use like proprietary data. For example, if I wanted to build an LLM that is a PHP specialist, what I would do is go find thousands of examples of like good, clean code. So we take the Laravel code base, any other good Laravel code base I can get my hands on, because you want hundreds, you want a lot of code to fine tune on, but then you could do a fine tuning process on that model and then make it an expert in PHP. But also, if you really were careful about the data you're feeding in, you're also going to get high quality code output because you shaped it in the direction of code like the Laravel framework. And so it's going to start outputting code that looks a lot more like that than initially when you started, where it could be anything. But the additional round of fine-tuning training is also going to just weight it more towards PHP, and it's going to be a little less cognizant of the other stuff. It's that attention mechanism switches a bit when you do fine-tuning.
Okay. Just to kind of go a little bit deeper into RAG, thanks for touching on that, TJ. Another question we got here. I don't know if you're familiar with the OpenAI's new feature that they pushed called My GPTs. Basically, they're a way to create a sort of static persona that you can keep chatting with. Is that an example of RAG?
Yep. Yep, that's basically OpenAI's like hosted. Let's make this easy for people to make RAG. So that's essentially what it is. You're giving it. I know a couple of people who have built Laravel assistants, and they're more or less feeding the Laravel docs into that like custom assistant on OpenAI, and then it's using that to like feed that context. It's a very similar process to what I showed today.
Cool.
Got a Sparkle question from the chat. In Sparkle, are you planning to add any kind of permissions system or audit trail of the interactions with the LLM?
I wasn't planning on building in anything specific for permissions because I think that's something that you could handle at the app layer like really easily. As far as an audit trail goes, that's where I think that tracing observability that I want to build comes into play. There's several services out there for that. Definitely plugging into a couple of them with that feature that I'm building out. But you could easily associate like a trace from a conversation back to a single user if you wanted to, and then layer that permission system right on top of your app. So I'm not intending on doing anything for permissions, but the audit trail, I think that's something I could tie into the observability for sure.
Yeah. I think that that tracing and observability you touched on there seems like really key, because I feel like otherwise it has such a potential to be this sort of black box. I don't know what happened. I put this thing out, this thing came out the other end, and I don't really know what happened in between. So,
well, especially when you get into building agents that can use their own tools, like you don't have any, if you don't have that layer of tracing observability, you don't know which tool it called, whether it's using any of the tools, or maybe it got stuck in a weird loop and it requested the weather 6 times. Like that happens too, where you just like, it sits there and like, we'll just loop through using both of those tools for whatever reason. And so you have to have the observability into that to like make those calls, or like see that, oh, I didn't describe the use of this tool well enough. I need to go fix that because it didn't use the tool when it really should have. So you have to have that to kind of be able to go back and look into that black box, like especially with the tool side of things.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. I had one, this is tangential, but the images you generated there, and I was talking with someone this the other day, and maybe it depends on, if you generate those images, do you own those images? Like if you wanted to use those for more commercial purposes, what's the licensing like on those images? How does that work?
I have no idea. So I mean, like full disclosure, what I'm doing with the branding for Sparkle and Shine, I got those initial images generated. Like I generated those with Dolly, but what I'm doing is I'm actually going out and hiring an artist to take that, like those as references, and then continuing to go on with it, because one, reproducibility is really difficult with Dolly. So just because I got one good shot, I don't know if I'm ever going to get it to make that image again. So part of it was I got the one that I wanted. Now let me go find an artist. It also kind of helps sidestep that problem. But yeah, I've never dove into the details.
I could, even what you described there, I could see that being super helpful, because like artistically, I feel like I have no talent. So like if I was trying to do this, can be kind of the middle ground to be like, this is kind of what I was visualizing closer to the final product, and then have someone do something super custom.
Yep. That's the approach that I've been taking with it. Is just like, let me get that stuff out there, and then but the other thing is just like having fun with it too. There's so far haven't done anything too serious with the images other than having fun. So it's not an avenue I've had to worry about.
Cool. Margaret, do you see any more questions from the chat?
Yeah, we got a question here from Joseph D. I would say, kind of like, what's Sparkle going to enable people to do? So it seems like there should be a lot more expert AI chats. There's one that does Laravel 11, one for Livewire 3. Is Sparkle going to enable / empower smart people in our community to build these? What's your opinion on that, PJ?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, if you wanted to build like a chat Laravel 11 docs, like that's right up Sparkle's alley. So that's something that you'd be perfect for. There, you can also do, if you wanted to do like a personality prompt, because this is what I do a lot, is I have a personality that I like a lot. It's the one I use quite frequently is the Nova character from Sam. And I'll feed in like all sorts of tools for it, but we could also do RAG across multiple documents. So we can add context from both Laravel 11 and Livewire 3. So you could build in a RAG bot that has access to both of those, both of those sets of documentation, and get away with having, one agent for both of those instead of individual ones. But yeah, it's a framework for being able to build RAG, to be able to build function calling chatbots. If you wanted to do like text generation, all possible through the Sparkle package. So kind of your entry point into being able to do just about anything you want to do with them.
Awesome.
Well, cool, TJ. All right, I think those are all the questions. Do you have any other questions there, Dan?
There was one here. It's kind of general. I'll throw it up. Hi, could you please provide a pathway to study automation tasks starting from the beginning, including programming languages, content, courses, books, and more? Seems like there you go. That's always a good answer for the community. Yeah. Maybe specifically, if anyone's interested in some of the Python data science stuff, is there any Python resources that you'd point people to that helped you with your Python journey?
Yes. Just building stuff helped me with my Python journey. So like, that's how I learned best, getting my hands dirty, actually messing with stuff. So twofold thing. So Pinecone is a company, and they do like managed vector data storage. That's their thing, is really enabling like that vector storage side of things. But they have a very extensive list of like tutorials and blog posts on all sorts of stuff dealing with things Python, but also very heavy AI. I learned heaps from that. And I think that would be like a huge recommended source, is like, yeah, go check out Pinecone and the stuff they have available. They have courses on their YouTube channel. They have like, different people come in and talk about how to do these different things as well. So yeah, check that out and then just kind of sprawl out from there. It's a good entry point.
Awesome. Cool. Anything else you see there, Margaret, for questions? Or?
No, we're good. But yeah, it's nice to see all the different resources people can look into for this amazing new topic. AI is here to stay, so lots of
for sure.
Yeah, no, thank you once again, TJ. Thank you very much for joining us and sharing all that knowledge. That that's a daunting, like you said, a daunting task to kind of dive into some of this stuff. So really appreciate whenever there's a really in-depth topic, when someone takes the time to dive into those things and then share sort of at a higher level some of the things that others need to know to kind of get going with it. So that was awesome. That was a great crash course into some of this stuff. And
appreciate it.
Really looking forward to Sparkle. Yeah, I think a lot of people in the chat are too. Cool. All right, TJ, we will send you off here. Margaret and I just have a couple of slides to finish up, and then we'll send everyone on their way.
Good deal. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much for joining us. All right, Margaret, before we finish up, we just got a couple of slides here.
That's right. So again, just a little reminder, we have a giveaway. So again, thanks to our sponsor, JetBrains, for providing these licenses. You can just scan that QR code and you'll be prompted with a form, and you can join our giveaway, and then we'll email you with your prize if you've won. And next month, we have some exciting speakers. We have Matt and Mateusz. So they're going to be talking about, so on April 30th, stay tuned at 12 p.m. EDT. Matt's going to be talking about, oh crap, we're popular. And Mateusz is going to be talking about an introduction to Laravel internals. So really great talks. So we'll have 2 speakers next month. Stay tuned for that. And to make sure that you're staying up to date with what's going on in the Laravel community, especially for this meetup, you can sign up for email reminders on the Laravel Worldwide Meetup website at meetup.laravel.com. And you can do so there. And then to make sure that you are also catching this stream, I mean, you're on YouTube right now, checking it out. But again, if you need the link, if you're taking a look somewhere else on another platform, you can check us out on youtube.com/LaravelPHP. And that's where you can find our meetups. And yeah, just one other thing. Anything else is going on? Anything else on your mind, Dan?
I don't think so. I think we're good. I wanted to thank everyone for tuning in once again. And again, thank you, TJ, for that great sort of crash course into AI and preview of Sparkle. We're all really looking forward to it. And looking forward to for all of you joining us next month at the end of April for Matt and Mateusz. And until then, all the best, and we'll see you on the next stream.
Sounds good. See you next time.
Have a great day, everyone.